Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Book Passage's Conversations with Authors. I'm your host, Paula Farmer. It's not often we do Monday night events, but I'm so excited that we're doing this one now because it's a great way to kick off the week. And it's definitely a great exception, as is our featured book. I'm kind of sheltered by them and love it, as is our author. And by the way, if you are a regular Book Passage viewer of these very special events we have, and you haven't already, please take a second to like and subscribe. It really is a simple thing for you to do, but it really helps us out a lot, and we appreciate it. And also keep in mind, our authors will get to your questions later. Just put questions and comments in the chat, and we will get to it before the end of the program, or just sit back, relax, and actively watch. Our featured book, Let Me Be Frank, is an entertaining and eye-opening collection of by writer, actor, and feminist Tracy Dawson. In it, she showcases trailblazers throughout history who disguise themselves as men and continuously broke the rules to gain access and opportunities denied them because they were women. Let Me Be Frank, which, by the way, has one of the best covers of the year, illuminates with a wry warmth the incredible stories of a diverse group of women from different ethnicities and culture and backgrounds. And it's just a delightful read, and it looks great on the outside and the inside. Tracy Dawson is no stranger to doing what she wants in a man's world, having been a part of the entertainment and comedy scene for years. Tracy began on the main stage of the world-renowned Second City in Toronto. She was picked to be a writer and later cast as a lead actor on the Canadian comedy series Call Me Fitz. Sorry about that. That's F-I-T-Z. She went on to winning several awards, including the Gemini Award. She was born and raised in Canada, but she joins us from Los Angeles, where I believe that's where she calls home now. Her conversation partner tonight is Kate Novack. Kate is an Emmy-nominated writer, director, and producer of documentary films. Her most recent one is called Hysterical Girl. It was shortlisted for an Academy Award and nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Writing in a Documentary. She is a former print journalist. Kate was a writer and a producer on Page One, Inside the New York Times. Please join both these fabulous writers to our Book Passage virtual stage.
Thank you so much, Paula.
Thank you.
So, Tracy, I'm so happy to be here with you because about a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, when the short film of mine that Paula just mentioned came out, you sent me a message, I think it was on Twitter, and we began a conversation. You told me about this amazing book that you were in the midst of working on. And so this is a real full circle moment. I'm so happy to be here with you. And I wanted to read the full title of the book because it's pretty fabulous. It's Let Me Be Frank, a book about women who dressed like men to do shit they weren't supposed to do, which I love. So I wanted to start, when I first started reading the book, I expected that it would be sort of more narrowly about women who had dressed as men. But it actually is much broader than that. And I think like so really rich as a result, because it looks not only at women who disguise themselves as men, but also women who wrote anonymously as men, including some authors that I was really surprised I had no idea. And then also women who lived openly as women, but who, you know, either performed as men or styled themselves as men for a variety of reasons. And so I was wondering why you made the decision to sort of broaden it in that way.
Oh, well, hi, everybody. We're diving in. It's so exciting to be here. I just want to say, I agree, Kate. This is a full circle moment, and it's very special. Like, I've been just sort of vibrating all day, getting excited about talking to you. So, I had the idea and I thought, I just wonder how many women there are that would have disguised themselves in order to like break a barrier or like gain access and opportunity. And I started to research and I found a lot, but then it started to, I would learn about somebody like Mary Edwards Walker, Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, the sole female recipient of the Medal of Honor, the first surgeon during the Civil War. She was a woman. She identified as a woman, but she was arrested numerous times in her life for wearing men's clothes. Like, the charge would have been for impersonating a man. And her whole thing was, I'm not wearing men's clothes, I'm wearing my clothes. And she was just adamant about dress reform. And so when I would learn about someone like Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, first of all, I was like in love. And so I was like, she fits into the book. And so it just like it was a very organic process as I was researching. Do you know what I mean? Because I would just find these people. Louise Augustine Glees was someone that dressed as a man probably for an hour, right? And her entire story, she did it to escape from the mental sanitarium in Paris, where she had been one of the star hysteria patients, which is, we can get into any number of these stories later, but she when I read her story, and she was like a star at the time. She was like a sensation in Paris, right? But the aspect of the dressing as a man was such a small part of the story. But I said, I don't care. Like, I want her in the book. Like, it really came down to who sparked something in me that went, why don't we know more about these people? Why don't we know these names? Why don't we know these stories? Why don't we know about Jane Austen, which you and I have talked about previously, which we'll get to? It's like, why don't we know all these things? Why don't we know all that stuff about Joan of Arc that I put into the book? So I could go on and on about it, but it was like, it just had to spark something in me that was like, oh, this fits into the, like, stretching the premise, right? And that's why the subtitle isn't women who disguise themselves as men. It's dressed as men. It's like women who dressed as men. Now, dressed can be figurative, right? Like Catherine Switzer. I literally feel like I'm like, let's talk about all the women in the book, like Catherine Switzer, who ran the Boston Marathon, and she registered her name with her initials. So they thought she was a man. So she got in, right? And there was a huge uproar, and it was like a crazy, what went down was insanity because a woman ran the Boston Marathon. And so, like, I just was like, oh, let's stretch this premise. And then it makes it even more juicy. It makes it more like compelling. And it just needed to fit for me. I don't know if is that a good answer?
No, absolutely. Well, I think one of the first things I said to you after I read it is, it feels like a book that I could sort of wake up every morning, and depending on what I have to do that day or how I'm feeling that day, there is a story that kind of taps into something in everyone, I think. Is there anyone, and, if this is too hard a question to answer, you can answer it even just, from your point of view today in this moment, that you feel most connected to?
Well, if I don't like any of your questions, Kate, I'm just going to go pass.
Just ask what you want. Just answer whatever you want. Yeah.
No, I don't want to. No, I agree with you, because it's like, so a little story, a little tidbit is that, so when you write a book that has, each chapter is a self-contained person or group of people, you can really put them in any order you want, right? And so I finished the book and I changed the order of the chapters many times. It was hilarious. But what I did was I put everybody's name on these little note cards, and they all had different colors. And I had a whole system about what the colors meant. And I put them all on the wall of my office. And those cards are still there. I see them every morning. And so it's like all the names, I put the names, I put the era, because, you know, when you're moving around, like you want to give a real variety of like era. You don't want to put two people who are too close together time-wise, right? So anyway, I don't know if I'll ever take those cards down. I mean, probably for the next book, I'm going to have to take the cards down. But so when I walk into the office every day, it's like, oh, there they are. And so it's like it's just funny. Like sometimes it's like I do connect, like my eyes will go to somebody or someone else. And, you know, we're living in a dark time right now. Like, I mean, it's like an upsetting moment for women and birthing people. And I'm like, you know, you can't help but, even if the stories are different, like you just can't help but connect some of the stories in terms of someone trying to tell you what to do with your own body, you know, like whether it was trying to throw Mary Edwards Walker in jail because she wanted to wear fucking pants. You know what I mean? Like it's like you can kind of just go, they got through it. Like the women in this book got through some unimaginable shit, right? And it kind of makes you go, you know, so are we. Like, you know, here we are. We're still here. I mean, depending on the day, you're either like, we're still here. Why? And other times you're like, yeah, man, you know what I mean? Like you've messed with the wrong bunch, because we're not backing down. Sorry.
Well, that was like in the chapter about witch prickers, and you have to talk about witch prickers. You say, and you're right, it's true that, you know, the witch prickers chapter really hits home that we, you know, things might not be great in 2022, but they're better than they were. But like working on the stories about these women and then kind of living through not even the past few years, but the past couple weeks, do you feel like you bring something different to this moment now, you know, even just in the context of reproductive rights, having written about all these women who have been through all this and done all this?
I certainly feel really connected more than ever before to my own, like I'm not a doormat, like I'm not gonna, you know, and I feel that from the energy in the air right now and all the marches on the weekend. And it's like, I don't know, like I do feel like it's hard to say hope. It's some days it is hard to say like you feel hope, right? Sorry, just being authentic, you guys. But like, I do think that we are like strong and amazing. I mean, I think witch is a compliment. You know what I mean? Like, I think I am a bit witchy. You know what I mean? Like, I think I have, and a lot of my female friends, I think we feel that we've got some special stuff going on. And like, that's why they're so scared of us. Scared. I said scared. They're so
scarier than just scared. Yeah.
Right. It's like these little boys with their, you know, they've turned into graying old men that want to control our bodies or whatever. It's just like, sometimes you just look at them and you're like, you're just weak. Like you're so sad and weak that you need, that this is what you need. This is what you need to do. So, yeah, it's just like, it almost feels like a little, like the disconnect of like knowing how powerful you are and how powerful all people who've been othered are. And like the way that the dominant, you know, the white supremacist patriarchal fucking system is like treats you like you're less than human, like literally less than human. Like there's humans and then there's women. You know what I mean? It's just like, what? Like that's how it feels sometimes, because it's like, I don't know. It's just a disconnect, because you go like, you're not only are you wrong, you're like so wrong. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it's just like, no, this is going to sound terrible. Maybe some people will think I'm terrible in the audience, but like, no, we're the better ones. Like women are better. You've got it all wrong.
It's so funny to see these sort of badass women have to disguise themselves or represent themselves as men when they were such badasses to begin with. So, but let's talk about some of the individual women, because there are so many good ones, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for that. So, am I pronouncing her name correctly? Jean Barret, beginning with the category of women who actually did disguise themselves physically as men, because I thought that chapter was pretty hilarious.
Thanks.
And
but also like, thank you. That's a funny chapter, but like also like, you know, whenever I revisit that story, like also the fact that she was completely left off like she wasn't given any credit. Like that part is also maddening. Sorry, I interrupted you. I got like all Jean Barret.
No. I mean, and I think that one of the things that stood out for me is that the book, I laughed out loud. I sort of was screaming with laughter, but then also screaming mad. And it really does both. And it has this humor that is very subversive, which I really, really loved. So, and I do think that Jean Barret chapter is a really good sort of example of the way that you used humor in a very subversive way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thank you. I wonder if I should read a little tiny, just a bit of, I marked the page, but okay. So Jean Barret, I'll just tell the people watching that she was the first woman to circumnavigate the globe. She was born in the Burgundy region of France in 1740, and she was quite impoverished. Her family like lived on the land. They were rural. It's a terrible word. And, but she got a job that she became an assistant to this botanist guy. And then France was like, we want to do a round the world expedition and we want to throw all of our money into it because they just, you know, that was what you did back then. You wanted to like prove your muscle, but also they were like, oh yeah, and go out and discover things, like bring stuff back. And so they hired this botanist guy, Commerçant, we'll just call him Commerson. And Jean Barret was his assistant, and he needed an assistant on the ship, like on this journey, right? Which is probably going to be about 2 years on a ship. And so anyway, women were not allowed on naval ships. It was forbidden. He said, come and be my assistant. She disguised herself as a man, and she went to be his like little botanist assistant. And, you know, they were lovers also. As I say in the book, I go, it happens. And so, you know, let's see, I was going to read this little bit here. So there are many theories about why Commerçant took Jean. It seems likely that he saw a skill in her, and I'm guessing a passion for botany and discovery. He was also unwell and could trust her to care for him without making him feel like shit about it. They were also lovers, so there's that. Honestly, I picture them as a couple of horny science nerds wigging out over plants and shit. Setting sail for 2 years with a bunch of dudes wouldn't have been a proposition to take lightly, not to mention that the workload Jean was taking on was massive. You would have to have a passion for the work you were doing. There's no way it was just about following a man. Jean clearly possessed not only a thirst for adventure, but also bravery and chutzpah. And yes, she might also have been a bit horny for Philibert too. That was his first name, Philibert Commerçant. Even with that ridiculous name, it seems like a crazy idea, and I love that she was like, yes. The ships assigned for the voyage were the frigate La Boudeuse, which carried about 200 crew members, and the slower supply ship Étoile, with just over 100 on board. For 2 years, Jean's floating home was the Étoile, which one historian noted would have been the size of a townhouse. A townhouse? With 100 other people? I'm sorry, what? I don't really fancy sharing a bed with someone I like. 100 people in a townhouse sounds like a nightmare. So I'm laughing at my own self, an asshole. One ray of light was that because of all the equipment they had brought, the Étoile's captain, François de la Giraudet, offered up his quarters to Commerçant and Jean. That would have meant their own bathroom. And that information just makes my sphincter unclench. A place where she could release her boobs each day from their wrappings, a private spot to poop, a sanctuary where one could retire for one semi-regular cry. Perfect. Anyway, it goes on and on. I talk a little bit about private spaces to poop. It certainly is it becomes a running theme in that chapter. But so they did that. So they completed that around the world. It's thought that Commerçant was very ill, and so Jean did a lot of the actual discovering, going out and collecting things. And it is believed that she was the one, not him, who discovered what became known as the bougainvillea, which is everywhere in Los Angeles. I'm absolutely in love with it and I love it. But if you look at any documentation, his name is attached, right? Not hers. In fact, there's no mention of her really anywhere in the science annals, in terms of like, there's not one single plant that is named after her. And she was absolutely a part of many discoveries on that journey. So that made me crazy.
I think that you need to come up with a plant named after her.
Now, I think that they did a couple, like recently, like a year or two ago, they were like someone wrote an article, right? Someone wrote an essay and it was like, it's a shame that do. And so they said, okay, well, here's a plant. And it's like, I'm just like, too little, too late, guys. Like,
right.
I mean, yes, of course, she deserves everything, but what she really deserves is to be known and for people to like, I don't know, to just know her story and that she was like a part of, it's an incredible deal. And she went on to be like successful and she owned land, like her story to start from something so impoverished during a time when if you were born into a certain class, like, and lack of education and like, and you lived on the land, there was no like, okay, we're going to come up and we're going to move to the big city and that was not what was happening in that part of the world at that time. So her story is mind blowing. And let me show, I think I've already lost the page, but it's one of my favorite, I lost the page and I don't want to spend time looking for it, but the illustration for that chapter is just breathtaking.
The illustrations are fantastic in general. It's wonderful, wonderfully illustrated. It's interesting because there's sort of several women in the book who I had never heard of, which I loved getting to know them. And then there are several women that I had heard of, but for example, Jane Austen, who I did not know had written anonymously in her lifetime. And so can we talk about that a little? Tell me. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, because I was shocked when I talked to my friends who are far more well-read than I, and nobody knew that Jane Austen, and I'll just state it for anyone who's watching. So Jane Austen, while she was alive in her lifetime, never published anything using her name. She published, her first book was by a lady, which is pretty badass because it could have been anonymous or it could have been a pseudonym, but she chose by a lady, which I think is just kind of great. Because it wasn't customary. It was seen as unseemly. And it was, the whole idea of female modesty. It was, it wasn't common for a woman to use her name when publishing, right? But it's amazing because she's a superstar. She's a literal superstar author. And so when I found out that none of my friends had known that her name was not known until she was dead in the ground. And her brother published a biographical notice that they attached into her last book and said, the person that wrote these books is my sister, Jane Austen. And, some believe it was shocking and that he outed her, and others believed it was a loving tribute to say that she wasn't just an author. She was a great author. I mean, one of the best that's ever done it. Right. And so people, when I saw that my friends were shocked, like you were saying, you were shocked that you didn't know that. I said, well, this has to go in the book. Again, this isn't about someone dressing as a man or disguising themselves, but there is something that, like, the whole middle chapter is called Anonymous Was a Woman. And I explore anybody who used a male pseudonym or who wrote anonymously. It's like a big compendium chapter in the middle of the book. And also the Brontes. The Bronte sisters only published in their lifetime using male pseudonyms. They never used their real names. And Charlotte Bronte was famously ambitious and I want to be a writer and I want to be known to be a writer. Like those words are documented. And so, here I am, like, wishing I could have a conversation with her, right? Like, what if you were ambitious, you dedicated your life to writing, you wanted nothing more than to be admired as a writer, but you used the name Currer Bell. You never used your name. Like, what? I just want to know, like, what was that about? You know what I mean? Like, just the disconnect there between those two facts about her ambition. So, those were two of the biggies, right? And Mary Shelley as well. So Mary Shelley initially published Frankenstein anonymously, like no name was given. Still to this day, there's people who like believe that her husband wrote it, which just makes me want to throw something across the room. And but it was such a success that subsequent printings after the first printing, she did put her name on it, which makes me happy. Who cares what I think?
Oh, I mean, it's so intriguing to me to think right now we're at a time where, creative expression, whether it's film or writing, is viewed as a real personal expression of, the creator's autobiography, identity. And so to think that there was a time when, the work was so disconnected, from the author, is kind of startling.
It is, yeah. And it probably wasn't disconnected from their reality. Like, I think that they put themselves in the characters, right? Like Jane Austen probably, like she was probably in it, and people that she knows she put them in her books, but it's not the same as today, like you're saying, which is, every article you read is what the auteur like brought to what of their own story they put into it, and like wanting your name to be known. I mean, we're at the height of like, look at me, like, you know what I mean? Like, we've gone from like hiding in the shadows, don't put your name on your published work, to like TikTok, which is just like, it's me, look at me.
Although, as you also point out in the book, there are times on Twitter when you almost wish you could be anonymous. So there's like the other side of that coin as well.
Unfortunately, I haven't been on the receiving end of this kind of stuff, but I follow a lot of people, women online, and who receive like, the death threats and the I don't even want to say it out loud. You know what I mean? And it's got to just be like, like I say in the book, something like, we've gone from unsigned pages, I think, to locked Twitter accounts. Because I know several people who like have private accounts, you know what I mean? Because they don't want to deal with the wolves coming for them, just because they have opinions about bodily autonomy, let's say,
Right. Yeah. And I had said opposite side of the same coin. It's kind of all on the continuum in a way of women having too strong an opinion. And it used to be that they would disguise themselves as men, and now they get, trolled on Twitter. Not that women are the only people who get trolled on Twitter, but yeah. Is there any
like there's something in the book where it's just like, sometimes it's about access to opportunity. I want to study medicine. I can't study medicine. Yeah. I'll disguise myself as a man to go to medical school. Or, I want to run this marathon. I'm going to tell you my name is this on the paper. You gave me my numbers. Now I can run the marathon. But sometimes it's like literally self-protection, right? I mean, a big part of the author of that chapter, Anonymous Was a Woman, was about just the various reasons why someone would publish anonymously or use a pseudonym. Sometimes it's self-protection. Sometimes it's the times, right? This is what is expected of you. Sometimes it's very much, sales, right? Because like, oh, your book's going to do better if you use this name or this gender neutral name. I take exception to the term gender neutral name, because it's just so ridiculous, because it's not neutral. You're saying, hey, everybody, it's not a womanly name. It's not Joanne, it's JK. Everybody calm down. You can be wizards. It's just like, it's just so sad, because it's just ridiculous, right? Like, there's an aspect of it that's like this like couching thing so that everybody's okay, because God forbid you loved a wizard book that was written by a female author.
Totally. So there's also then where we sort of started off talking about the different categories that you deal with in the book, whether it's, pseudonyms, physical disguise. I also was so intrigued by the characters in the book who live openly as women, but sort of, because of their positions of power, need to sort of style themselves in a way that feels masculine. And so Hatshepsut, is that?
Hatshepsut, yeah.
Hatshepsut, the pharaoh. I would love for you to speak about her, because in reading about her, all I could think of was Hillary Clinton and all of the fuss about pantsuits or, not enough skirts, or, she was, either too womanly and weak or too masculine, and it was never quite right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing you learn too, just like living through watching female politicians is, guess what, guys? It's never going to be right. It's just never going to be right. You're too this, you're too that, you're hawkish, I mean, but yeah, Hatshepsut was so interesting because she had to step in as queen regent because her husband died. Listen, it's been a long time since but the new king, first of all, the new king came in and he was like probably a toddler, right? And so this was not uncommon for there to be a queen regent, someone that was just like, I'll kind of be pharaoh, but it's him, but I'm going to run things because he's a toddler, right? And then she was really good. She was exceptional. And something remarkable happened in her queen regent reign where she was crowned as pharaoh, king. And it was, the scholars and the Egyptologists that I read, it was more like co-king, because no one would ever get rid of that kid as he was continuing to grow. But she did everything. And so she was profitable. She did expeditions. She was really good at, her dad was like the big Tutmos, King Tutmos. He must have been number one. I swear, I wrote this book. There's a lot of people in the book, you guys. Anybody that's written a book knows that after you're done and you go through all the editing, and it's like so long from this when you start talking about it again.
And but also when you move things around, you don't remember where something ended up in the final,
Right.
Yeah.
So she was like, she was very high status because of who her father was. And she learned from him by watching him. She learned how to do the job really well. And it was one of the most successful reigns. She became the pharaoh. And then in the later years, as you remarked upon, the iconography and the statues and the images that remain, we see her taking on more masculine looks. There's even a fake beard that was either added just to the images, the facades, the statues, or, there's no way to know for sure if during some of her dealings in the court, if she actually did wear, which, I don't think that seems like it would be far-fetched that she would present herself to her people with this masculine garb and the fake beard. And it's absolutely fascinating. And it was almost like saying, like you're saying, right, with Hillary Clinton, it's like saying, like, I got you, like, you can trust me. Like, look, you know what I mean? Like, I can roll with the dudes, you know what I mean? It was like, and it's interesting that came later in the reign too, right? Because it's almost like, well, what's happening? Are people starting to lose faith? Are they starting to question? Like, and the little kid, the toddler's getting older, but she was, there was something else I was going to say. Darn it. I lost my train of thought. The last thing I'll say is, is that I had never heard of her. I don't know if you had.
I had not.
And so to me, again, that's what struck me the most when I read about her. Of course, the masculine stuff and the garb and the fake beard was like, oh yeah, she totally fits in. But it's also like, she's one of the most successful pharaohs ever. And I've never heard of her. That just like made me, and I have talked to friends, and many people have heard of her. She's not completely unknown, but I certainly hadn't heard of her. And I thought, well, again, this person, and the way that her story was told, like in the 50s, like the way the early Egyptologists, I talk about this in the chapter, they treated her poorly. They painted her as some usurper, as some like sort of like opportunistic. And it's like, the more recent and updated scholarship in Egyptology says that doesn't track. It sounds like that's you guys. Like, you don't mean putting some spin because you've got like mommy issues or something.
Well, it seemed to me that in reading the chapter, it was as she became more powerful,
right,
less acceptable that she had these feminine qualities. And so that was when she kind of adopted this like masculine garb and the wig, the beard, and and then you also, I mean, this is a altogether different category, but you know, I thought the discussion of male impersonators was also really interesting. And I would love to, could you tell us a bit about Florence Hines?
Sure. I mean, I wish I could tell you a lot more about Florence Hines. As I say in the chapter, there's so little that was preserved when you compare it to her white counterparts, you know, the people who were, Florence Hines was African-American, and she was the foremost female comedian and what was called at the time a male impersonator. And, you know, at the time she was a sensation. She was, there's just no question, the way that the things that have been preserved, the press that she got, the things that a journalist said about her, that she was like the absolute best and flawless and no one can do what she does. And doesn't that make you go, why do we not know when she was born, where she was born, what year she died? Like, why weren't there programs from her shows that were saved? And, you know, so I had to piece together a bunch of stuff about her. And luckily a few people have written about Florence Hines. And I just think she sounds like, you know, I definitely want to go to her show and hang out with her, because her whole her act was she dressed as a dandy. So she had like the hat and the outfit. And, you know, the research that I did shows that not only was this like maybe the beginnings of drag kings, right, and male impersonators, but really it's like she was like a godmother of females in comedy, just like comedians. Like this, her bit was, you know, she impersonated men, and she did song and dance, and she worked with the crowd. She was very successful both with African-American audiences and white audiences. She crossed over to both. And but again, the startling thing is, why is there not more known? Well, we know why, because this country has not treated African-American people and the artists and the originators of incredible cultural moments with any, I mean, it's disrespectful and it's disgusting, you know, that it's just lost to history. It's just gone, you know, there's no, anyway, so it's just a shame that there's just not more, like.
Well, and she really upended this minstrel form.
Yes, absolutely. Because she was portraying this dandy type character who was supposed to be, you know, like upper class and fraternized with women, enjoyed drinking and was like, came from money and had the finest clothes. It was like, it was sort of a subversive act, because if a white female had done that act, it would have been like, oh, she's making fun of her people or her, like perhaps like people that she socialized with. But at the time, it certainly was more common on those stages to have minstrelsy, which was, again, kind of a shameful time in that time of theater, because white people were running those shows. There was people in blackface. And what they were saying was, this is authentic, you know, Black life, which is, it just stops you in your tracks, you know, because it was very like dim-witted and like lowly characters and just everything you could imagine from what minstrelsy would have been, right? And so here comes Florence Hines, she's an African-American woman, and she's presenting herself as someone who has money and does whatever they want. And so it was absolutely a subversive act and succeeded. People loved her. You know what I mean? Like, she brought the house down. The notices that, again, that were preserved, like, you just go, damn it. I mean, don't you wish you could have been there? And don't you wish someone had documented it more appropriately? Yes.
And so how did you go, because so many of the characters in this book, it seems like there was not a ton of available material, and the bibliography is pretty robust, and it sounds like you used a lot of primary sources. So can you talk a little bit about how you went about researching it?
I mean, I'm not trained. I don't have a background in research, but I certainly I learned a lot about how to best use the internet, to be honest, like how to search, like, honestly, it's so silly, but it's like just searching like words in closed quotations and like a phrase that would be like 2 or 3 words long, and just like, it was literally like digging. It was like, it was excavating and trying to track down, like news clippings from the time of Florence Hines, just so I could see like one mention of her in something that someone scanned. Google is an incredible thing. Whatever. I shouldn't say Google. The internet. The internet is amazing. And honestly, like, I learned while writing this book that I love research, because I didn't really want one source. I wanted, as the bibliography will attest, I wanted to come at things from as many angles as I possibly could, because traditionally the people that write things down over history were old white dudes, and stuff gets left off the page, right? Like, if someone goes, well, that's not an important detail, or like, it's just like, maybe it is an important detail, but like, someone made a decision about how to frame something or how to spin something, as we saw with Hatshepsut and those early Egyptologists and scholars. So I tried to I didn't want to read just one or 2 things. If I could, I wanted to read as many sources as possible. And sometimes, yes, it's like a gazillion. There's a lot of books in the bibliography, but of course you're just reading that one section of that one chapter and that thing, right? But I just wanted to try to come at things from different angles so that I could then feel it in my body about almost like what are you leaving off the page? Because if you wrote this and you wrote that, and then there's like, I don't know how to explain it. But I had a researcher come up to me at my book launch event here in LA. She's a real researcher. And she's like, the way you answered that question about research, like, she goes, you're a natural born researcher. And I was like I felt more proud. Like she validated me, even though, again, like, it was like, I just did it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just was like, this seems to be the right way to do it, in order to try to like find the people or find the nuggets that are not necessarily what's being touted as the main story. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, you can feel the hunt in the book. And you can, and I love it. And, any one of these women and any one of these stories on its own is interesting. But then when you put them all together, it becomes this real, on a very meta level, a really alternative approach to history. Which
that's really cool. Yeah. Like, almost like, like there's ways that we've all been taught things. I mean, you and I talked on the phone the other day about Joan of Arc. It's like, I was going to name, there was a time when I was writing where I was thinking of naming the chapters before I decided, no, it should just be the person's name. It should just be, keep it simple. The person's name is the name of the chapter. But originally the Joan of Arc chapter was going to be known as, I was going to call it, the one you think you know, because I think a lot of people, I've had a lot of feedback from people who've read it so far, which is, I thought I knew, but I didn't. And I was like, that's how I felt. So it feels so validating that that's how I felt as I was reading and piecing together things and reading court transcripts and stuff. And I was like, oh, like, I don't think a lot of people know that one of the main charges that led to her being burned at the stake was about wearing men's clothing. I don't think people necessarily know that, right? They're just like, heretic. She was called a heretic. But when you read through the documentation and see that, she says that she kept her male clothing on when she was being held in the prison to protect herself from sexual assault. And she told the court this, and they were like, we don't care. No, take it off. So it's just like, it's one of those things that, again, like there's times when I wrote the book where I felt like I had to lie down in the middle of some sections because you're just like, guys. Oh.
Well, I also, some of the anger that I felt was because there are so many modern parallels. Like, we talked about the Hillary Clinton one, but there are many, where you feel like this lives on, albeit in a different form. Mm-hmm. One of the other stories that really stood out to me was I had always thought that Wonder Woman was the first female superhero. Mm-hmm. And the book sets that straight. And I thought also, and I want you to talk about this, Wonder Woman was not, in fact, the first female superhero. Wonder Woman was written by a man. Miss Fury was the first female superhero written by a woman. And I think it's a real kind of study in the male versus female gaze in thinking about those two superheroes.
Right. Well, there's two things there, right? There's like who created the first female superhero? Well, whoever it is, right? Well, the first one wasn't Wonder Woman. It was Miss Fury. And Tarpe Mills originally was believed to be a man. She was a comic book writer and illustrator. She did both, and she was exceptional at both. And she created Miss Fury, and this was in the 1940s. And Miss Fury came out a whole 8 months before Wonder Woman came on the scene. So that was something that struck me. I was like, I've never heard of Miss Fury. And when you read some of these, there's not enough that's been preserved. I'm very sad to say that there's no biography, like no book that exists that I could find that is about Tarpe Mills, which to me, I'm like, when she was alive, when Miss Fury hit it started off as with the comic books, and then she got the very coveted job of a strip, right? Because that's regular, continuous work. And for a comic book creator or a comic writer, that was the coveted job, right? And so it was a sensation. She was being written about. And when they found out that she was a woman, because she was an attractive woman who sort of looked like her Miss Fury character, all the newspapers and Newsweek and everybody hopped on it. And it was during World War II. So the men were off at war. So it was like, the whole thing was just like snowballed into this incredible sensation. Well, she was one of the biggest things ever at the time, but there's no biography written about her life. And all of her comics and strips that were published, I think 2011, 2012, those books are out of print. You can't get them unless you find used, vintage copies, which again is like, what? And I think it was the people that published those comics eventually over the years turned into Marvel. She wasn't working for Marvel. Marvel wasn't the thing back at the time. I think it was Timely Comics. Timely? Someone's watching is like, it's such and such. But anyway, it turned into Marvel eventually. So for my money, I'm like, okay, Marvel, like, I think you should be in charge of the legacy here and in charge of the Miss Fury movie, and I should write it. And not that I'm a superhero movie writer, but I'm just so passionate. I'm passionate about her, Tarpe Mills, as well as her character. And the fact that she was a sensation, a huge, they painted Miss Fury on the nose of multiple B-52 bombers during the war. It was huge. So, and in an incredible character. The bad guys were Nazis. She had no superpowers. She was an incredible lead character. She had multiple suitors, you know, and Wonder Woman, on the other hand, created by a man. And again, I love Wonder Woman. I'm down for Wonder Woman. And William Moulton Marston, I believe that's his name, or I got his name flipped, the man who created Wonder Woman, self-proclaimed feminist. People love him, right? So I'm not saying anything bad about Wonder Woman, but she was written by a man, and she was portrayed as like Diana was like pining over Steve and like was jealous of her alter ego because he liked her better. And I mean, it was more of like a stereotypical like pining woman while having these superpowers and being this superhero. Whereas Miss Fury, I didn't do anything like that. She was sexy as hell. She didn't have any superpowers, and she was a badass even when she wasn't in her costume. You know what I mean? Like that was how Tarpe Mills portrayed her. Like she'd be like fishing. She'd be like out fishing and like angling, and then she'd be like, I have to go. Someone needs help or whatever. Like that's a big deal when it's almost like you go, representation matters. Like it's the 40s, and these women are seeing themselves like, oh, it's like she's fishing and then she's going to go help catch these bad guys. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's amazing.
Did you come across anyone in your research who, you know, we all know, or most of us probably know the movie Shakespeare in Love, but women, this is actually a question that came in. Women in the Shakespeare period disguising themselves as men in order to participate in theater?
I didn't. And I love that idea because it's like, you know, obviously it was very common during the time for the males to play all the female characters, right? And I did see Shakespeare in Love, but I saw it a hell of a long time. Yeah. But does Gwyneth Paltrow play someone who disguises herself as a man so that she can act in the play?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that what the storyline is?
Yes.
So sad that I'm like, is that what it is? Yeah, that would have been really cool. And I didn't come across anyone like that. But I relate to that because I'm a theater nerd and I was a theater kid. And so I would have definitely been like, I mean, I still think this to this day, right? Like there's characters in musical theater, like who have like great roles or like those great numbers. And you go, I'm never going to be able to sing that song because, you know, and I think, well, you know, I could play Sweeney Todd. Maybe I could play Sweeney Todd.
Well, and now you see that more like, was it King Lear?
Like the gender switching casting for sure. It's definitely. I mean, my friend Kelly Fox, the great Kelly Fox, who might be watching, great Canadian actress director, I believe played Hamlet. I don't know how many years ago that was. Perhaps in Rochester. If she's watching, she's gonna be like, girl, you got it wrong, but thanks for the shout out. But yes, that is happening more, and I want to see it. I mean. Didn't Ruth Negga played I don't want to say, I know she's in Macbeth right now, but I believe she also played a male Shakespeare lead a few years back or whatever, and she's one of the best to do it on the stage right now. So I'm totally into that kind of casting, but nothing came up for that in with my book. I mean, you know what I got a lot of that I had to like not include was there's just a lot of military. You know, you have to pick and choose, right? You don't want like 6 chapters, all the different versions of a woman disguising herself as a man to go and fight. You know, it's a bit monotonous. But a lot of people probably don't know that there was upwards of 400 women that disguised themselves as men and fought in the Civil War. Probably not all on the right side, but you know, that's incredible, you know, that was kind of like a thing during the Civil War.
Tracy, I want to make sure that we don't go away without hearing what brought you to this topic. Like, you know, you are a TV writer, a comic, you an actor, and so how'd you end up here?
I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna write a book next. No. You know, I had an idea for a TV project. I thought, you know, you look at something like Black Mirror, which is an anthology show, and each show is self-contained and it's a story. And I thought, well, what if Drunk History, you know, that great show, Drunk History had like a weird baby with Black Mirror, and it was feminist, and it was true stories about women who disguise themselves as men or my stretched version of the premise. And I put together a pitch and we took it out, and was not successful in selling it. And a whole bunch of other stuff was going on at the time. And I thought, oh, I just love these women. I've done all this research, and it felt like I can't just be like, well, that project didn't go. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could not let it go.
Yeah.
And I've never thought I could write a book. I've never thought I want to write a book or I should. I haven't really thought that. And then I thought, oh, maybe this is a book. So I took all the research and I started writing it. And I really took it very lightly, meaning I was like, maybe this is a book, as opposed to like other projects. I mean, creative people who are listening, like sometimes you're so filled with angst and you just want to say something, and it becomes like so like heavy, and this was more like, maybe this is a book. And that worked for me because I really just was like, I don't know. And then I went to other people who know more than me, and I said, hey, I have got these pages. And then it really happened organically. And it's such a joy because, yes, of course, it's awesome. I wrote a book. It's absolutely beautiful. Like, it exists in the world. All those things are true. My name is on it. Super cool. But honestly, it's like, oh my God, like, for real, Kate, like, those people are going to learn about these women. Like, it's like the thing that I was so worried about, like, which is not doing them justice, not being able to, like, I don't want to just tell people in the coffee shop, like, it's like, oh, like, maybe, like, I hope it does well, because I honestly I just want people to know these women. It's true.
Absolutely. And know them all together. I love that they're all here together in this book. So no, it's really great. So congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, so fun to talk to you. And were there questions? I know I went on and on.
No. The only other question I see is, did you discover Dr. James Barry, aka Margaret Bulkley? Wonderful book about her called The Cape Doctor by E.J. Levy.
So Dr. James Barry, I did not include because what we come to see when we read about Dr. James Barry was that he was assigned female at birth, but went to medical school in Edinburgh. And from that moment on, never again presented or identified as a woman. And so I intentionally left Dr. James Barry out of this story. Of course, Dr. James Barry can live in women's history and live in trans history at the same time, but it was not appropriate to include Dr. James Barry because it wasn't like a temporary thing. There may have been a disguise aspect to Dr. Barry's story at the beginning when he went to school, right? But it's not for me to say, right? It's not for me to be able to tell that story about, because he never again identified as Margaret, as his dead name. And so even though that terminology of transgender was not a thing in that time period. And so it becomes tricky, like when you assign terminologies, right? However, if you just look at the facts in terms of like how he identified from that moment onwards, you go, yeah, that's not my place to write about someone who I believe, and many, many scholars now believe was a man. Mm-hmm. It wasn't appropriate for him to be in this story. Right. However, I will say, this will be my final thing, that his story is incredible. And I just think it's important for people to look at different sources, in terms of like how he is gendered and described in his history. Hmm. Yeah, I answered a question.
You answered it multiple. Everyone in the chat, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you even answered my question before you even saw it. So it's like,
I know, yes,
don't forget that question. You already answered it.
Excellent.
So thank you. Excellent presentation by both of you. Kate, what a great moderator.
So great. Thanks, Kate.
Very fun, Tracy.
Excellent.
Congratulations on the book.
As we were saying earlier, I want to make sure people get a really good look at this beautiful, uniquely creative cover, and it has some weight and heft to it. I think like I'll get it for coffee table, like a smaller coffee table type book. So come for the cover and the creativeness, but stay for the stories, the information, the history. It's all really great and very unique. I'm so glad you did approach the subject and the way you did, and that your publisher was on, just seems like was so on board with you with everything.
I was really lucky because, the only voice that I know is, you can write in multiple voices, but my voice is very passionate and I come from a background of humor, but obviously I have a very strong feminist agenda. So I was like, I want people to listen to me, right? And I think a lot of the time you get people to listen to you when you're talking to them conversationally and with some humor involved. Oh, and Paula, I also want to remind anyone that the book passage has some signed copies. There's some.
Yeah. Once again, you're beating me to the punch.
I'm so excited.
Tracy, you're eliminating my position.
Sorry. I take it back.
We do have book plates. So what you're going to get is like first edition signed, basically. So what a value, not only the content and the look of it, but also just, it's rare these days that we get signed books and book plates. So such a treat. Thank you for doing that for us, Tracy. Kate, thank you for moderating. Remind people, please, don't just watch and enjoy, but take that extra step and actually buy the book, support Book Passage and independent bookstores, support the authors. We love it. We appreciate it. And until our next event, everybody be safe and be happy and mindful and all that good stuff. And thanks to our author and moderator. Can't wait for the next project from either one of you.
Yay. Thank you so much.